Possiamo partire.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Ready?
Ready or not, we have to go. So.
Let's see, we have to go.
Sta registrando? Perfetto, quando vuoi, when you want.
Okay. Please tell me a little bit about the company, Mutti, and how it's come about and how you yourself got into the company.
Well, first let's start from a little bit of history.
Yeah, history.
Because of course tomato deals with the history of Mutti and deals with the history of Parma. Tomatoes start to be grown in Parma at the end of the 19th century, and Mutti is one of the first and oldest company in the transformation of tomatoes. Parma became really a center for the development of tomatoes, and is still now after 100 years. But many things changed from that time, the ancient time, to now. Let's consider that more than 100 years ago, but still up to the Second World War, it was impossible to move for long distances the tomatoes. Only with oaks we had the possibility of moving them for a few kilometers. That is one of the reasons for which there were so many companies, more than 100 companies, in a very small area like Parma.
In Parma region?
In Parma area. Parma is not really a region, it's 1/10 of a region, of a small region.
Okay.
Especially if you consider, let's take it's 80 kilometers per 100 kilometers approximately. So it's still a very small area, and a part of it, all the part in which the Parma ham is done, is not suitable for cultivation because it starts to be on mountain. Not very high, but mountains. So in the other side of Parma there were more than 100 companies, and also our, let's call it that time group, had a peak of 13 places, factories in which we transformed the tomatoes. Okay. Because it was impossible to ask the farmers to move the tomatoes for 50-30 kilometers. Let's imagine in the hot summertime in Italy, really making distance is really hard. From that time many things changed, and of course now the number of companies strongly reduced, and it's a different business, is a different way of working. What is not changed is definitely the capacity to find out the best raw material, the best tomatoes. And the microclimate existing in this area gives also now, after more than 100 years, definitely the best tomatoes of the entire Pianura Padana. We do not buy only from Parma, we buy from all over Pianura Padana, but the characteristic of these tomatoes, of this land, of this area, are really of a superior quality in relation to the average of the northern part of Italy.
Definitely. And the company itself is 100 years? You've been with family with?
Well, yes, the family is over 100 years, we are going to 115 years. Let's say that at the beginning there is really a movement, so the families, the richest families in Parma, were working in different fields related to agriculture, so everybody had pigs for the production of Parma ham. Then we had the production of milk for the Parmesan cheese, and the introduction really of the tomatoes. From that moment, I think that Mutti started to have a very significant strategy related to quality. Just a few words, we won at that time in 1911 the gold medal at the Exposition of Rome, the gold palm in 1925 in Paris for the international show, and a couple of milestones of our history is the creation, for example, of the tube.
Yes,
that was a big
leap.
Yeah, especially because we are talking of 1951.
And this is the thimble tube.
Yes, with the thimble, yeah.
And you did that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, not me, of course.
But your
That
uncle?
was my big uncle Ugo Mutti.
Really? Fantastic.
Yes, and had this idea. And at the first beginning, all our competitors start saying, well, then people will not recognize toothpaste from tomato paste. But for the consumer, it was a good and strategic advantage. Also because remember that at that time were not existing the frigo in the frigidaire into the normal warehouses. So having the possibility of closing this packaging was definitely a fantastic advantage for the housewives.
How long has it been? The thimble?
Well, the thimble stay up to the beginning of the 70s.
Okay.
Then, unfortunately, we have to leave it because we have to close completely the tube. It was different, the first tube produced in 1951, from the one we have to utilize at the beginning of the 70s that was completely closed. And with innovation that gives a better protection to the product inside, we had to lose the thimble because inside there was something on which you could open the tube itself. The second innovation, the second major innovation, and maybe even more important, has been the creation of the polpa.
The polpa, yeah.
Polpa is a very particular product. Let's imagine that at the beginning of the 70s there were only two products. The tomato paste that was used especially in the northern part of Italy, and in the southern part there was the tomato please. Tomato please is a very good product, of course, but needs, especially at that time, to be worked for a quite long time. What do I mean? Let's remember that the tomato please at that time were in their juice.
Yeah.
Now we utilize a passata to keep them, but at that time there was a very watering, juice, clean, yellow, slightly yellow. So you have to cut them and leave them to become drier for 20 minutes. So it was a really deep and long work to utilize them fresh. So always Ugo Mutti started to think, well, we could create a different product, putting together the characteristic of the tomato please, so the freshness, with the ready-to-use product like tomato paste. And he decided to create now, in these days, if you want to make a polpa, a line for the production of polpa, you go to one of the major producers of machinery and you ask for a line for polpa. That was not the case. What I mean is, you couldn't ask nothing to nobody because the product was not existing.
So there was no knowledge of this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we built the machinery inside, and still now it's completely different. Let's take a couple of examples. First point is, in our polpa you cannot have green parts.
Yeah,
Even if you put green tomatoes in it for a physical process, you cannot have green parts of it inside the tin.
This is why this polpa is so fantastic.
That's one of the
It's so
reasons.
noticeable.
The second point is that the average production of polpa with the different method can reach 50-60 kilograms every 100 kilos of fresh tomatoes.
Okay.
While with our polpa we work on 19 kilos per 100 kilos of tomatoes. So we are able to obtain only 19 kilos of polpa from 100 kilos of fresh tomatoes. That give a completely different product.
Redder, more sugar, sweeter.
Yes, absolutely.
Richer.
And you have really the fresh taste of the tomatoes kept into a tin. So during winter time, you have the possibility of bringing at home and opening the freshness and the sun of the Italian summertime.
Yeah, because this is the reason why we made polpa in the original sense. Because you want the tomato when it's not the season.
Absolutely, that's the
Exactly
reason.
right.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic product. Absolutely, the best I've seen.
Thank you.
For sure. And how far has it changed Mutti come in the last 40 years, 30 years? This has been the big leap, hasn't it? This has
Yeah, well,
a noticeable difference.
consumer perceived more and more quality also on tomatoes. That gave us a great competitive advantage. Now, for example, our polpa is strongly recognized by the Italian consumers as the quality product. So they buy it, they love it, and even, you know, Italy's in deep crisis since a long time, but people are more and more willing to invest for obtaining a better product, yes. And that gives us a continuous growth, even if our product is slightly more expensive than the average.
Anything that's good is more expensive.
Well, but the mix between the quality you get more and the difference of price is definitely...
There's no water content,
yeah.
There's more in the unit, that's exactly right, and that's what I've noticed.
Expert.
It's a much better product, yeah. Definitely.
So in the last 20 years, consumers also, not only with polpa but with the range of our product from passata to tomato paste, people recognizing, the consumer recognize more and more the impact of quality on the day-by-day cuisine, and that is definitely the first reason for our growth in Italy and abroad.
And
yes.
Also I learned that France is very strong with Mutti.
Yes, France is, but you know, we're growing in countries like Sweden, which you will not imagine, for example, that
In Germany.
Well, mostly everywhere. Our problem, brackets, now is more to continue this growth, finding the best tomatoes. That's the reason for which we